A warm welcome to those of you joining us for this conversation on Celtic Song. I'm delighted to be here today with Irial O'Ceallaigh, renowned traditional Irish singer. Irial is a native of Gaeltacht in County Waterford. He's from a family of shadow singers, and he's from a parish that's steeped in Irish traditional song. He's a member of Clár Ní Bhuachalla. He's a teacher of Irish song, and he has won awards at various festivals, including Féile Nicholas Tobin and Féile Oireachtas na Gaeilge, of course. Míle fáilte rót, Irial, you're very welcome here to UCD Festival.
Lovely to be here.
Could you firstly tell us, what is traditional or sean-nós song?
That's an interesting debate now, Clár, and a lot of people would have a different interpretation of it. For me, sean-nós means the old ways or the old traditions, stemming back to Celtic times and bringing the rules that the Celts would have had with them from 5,000, 4,000 years ago onwards. It's been shaped, moulded by different invaders of Ireland and people who came here in different cultures, especially the Normans. And a lot of the rules we have today would have come from southern France and the Normans from 1,000 years ago. It's changed as well over the years. Obviously, with the bringing in of the Catholic Church, with bringing in from different rules from England and other countries as well, it would have changed. It's also evolving all the time. From maybe 400, 500 years ago, and the rules we had then, they've even changed a little bit from then. But really what you're looking at is a type of song sung by one person, no instruments, with different ornamentation, varying slightly from Irish-speaking area to Irish-speaking area. And heavily focused on either love songs, songs based on nationalism and love of country and love of area, and the political songs as well.
Mm-hmm. And would you call yourself a sean-nós singer?
Yeah, some people would say a bad sean-nós singer, depending on who I'm talking to and what people prefer as regards style. But yeah, absolutely I am. Mm-hmm. And within that as well, I suppose, we're not just going to be focusing on singing today. We're going to be talking about history as well and culture. Mm-hmm. And within that as well, not alone would I consider myself a singer, but really you're a storyteller. And how you even sing, whether you go minor or change variation of a song, it's based on what the words are telling you. So if there's a sad song, you make the song sadder in your own way by bringing it minor, by slowing it down. Happy songs, then the same thing again, you get the tempo and the rhythm going. So really you're a storyteller as well as just a singer.
You're from a very unique part of Ireland, Gaeltacht UCD in County Waterford. How did you come to Irish song? Were you influenced very heavily by your own background?
Yeah, well, I couldn't escape it. Even if I wanted to escape it, it was impossible. My mother would be a sean-nós singer. She's won Oireachtas na Ceallaigh, which would be the main sean-nós singing competition twice. She sung in the original River Dance. People might know her from that.
Indeed.
She had 2 solo pieces back in 1995 when that would have started off in what was the Point Depot in Dublin at the time. She's also been on Broadway for a year on a show called The Pirate Queen back in 2007, 2008. As well as that, my family from her side would have been, deeply involved in the Irish language and singing, which are obviously very much intertwined. And in our area as well, it's the only native Irish-speaking area in the east of Ireland. Obviously, Rockcarn being a bit different, but being a colony really of Gaeltacht areas that was placed in the east. And a big reason that we kept our culture and the language alive there, 2 hours from the next Irish-speaking area in the west of Cork, is through song.
Yes.
It was a huge part of our culture. Everybody from home who would have gone through the education system would have had singing classes up until the age of 18. Mm-hmm. We have 3 different choirs, even though we only have a population of 1,600. So it's hard to escape it. Every time there's a gathering as well, People will always sing together. A song is a huge part of the tradition. And not alone were we lucky enough to have a man called Clár Ní Bhuachalla, who was what people all around Ireland, not just our area, would say was the best sean-nós singer who ever lived. But we had the Clancy brothers, who people might know from traditional song, more kind of English folky songs in Ireland. They would have been based in our parish as well. They moved there later on, obviously, originally from South Tipperary.
Yes.
So it was very hard to escape singing, and still is to this day.
So you had a very rich cultural background, really. You touched on it just there, the significance of song in the culture of Ireland and the role it played, I suppose, in Irish history and Irish politics. Is that something that has influenced you as a singer?
It absolutely has. And I think it's influenced every Irish person. If you talk to Irish people in other countries as well, they have the songs of their area. We say in Ireland, our Auntie Nalina, the people's songs. Within Ireland then as well, it's something we might as well touch on now. We weren't allowed to write our own history. So if you go back to the penal laws, 16th century to 18th century, we weren't allowed to write. If you go back to Celtic tradition as well, writing wasn't a thing anyway. It was very much looked down on and against tradition to write anything down, which is where the word Celt comes from. Celt would come from the Irish word Celt, rather chamad fwy Celt, to keep something a secret. Because our tradition within Celtic law was always a verbal one, an oral history, oral laws, oral tradition, very much avoiding writing, which is why the Greeks called us the Celts, because they didn't understand what we were doing. It was all passed down verbally. That continued with our nationalism, with our sense of identity as a people, and especially for those 200, 300 years where we weren't allowed to write. The history, the culture, the customs of the Gaels, I suppose would be a better word than the Celts, the Gaelic Irish speakers, was nearly entirely kept just through song.
Yes.
And in no other place. And you can see that today. Even, I spent a lot of time in Belfast. You look at the beginnings of nationalism of Ireland in the 19th century, it's just wrapped up in song. And when people get their nationalistic tendencies, you go to a Celtic match, you go to somewhere like that, it's song that drives it. And it's our history and our culture that's contained in those songs, I think, more than any other country in the world.
That's so true. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. In English and in Irish, but obviously it would have come from Irish in the beginning, and it's translated itself into these English national songs that we have now at the moment.
Yeah. So in the context of history and the culture of Ireland, could you give us an example of a song which illustrates that?
The Irish are best known throughout the world for leaving Ireland and emigrating. A lot of that was chosen for economic reasons. A lot of it not, from the famine, and a lot of the songs that I would have, it speaks about the famine, which has kind of been lost through the historical documentation, isn't covered, and there's some very interesting songs there. But the other way that we travelled the world was through transportation. Indentured servitude was another way. But talking maybe about Australia, there's a very interesting song that we would have from home about three brothers called the Connerys. And within this song, you just get so much history, so much knowledge from this song. This really covers three brothers who, at the time, were accused of robbing a pig. As simple as that. And people from Ireland and England and Wales and Scotland were transported to Australia for the most simplistic of reasons and really the silliest laws you can think of. The other thing that it speaks to is injustice. There was, some pretty serious injustice going on at the time all around the world, but within Ireland, what this highlights is the plight of Catholics and Irish speakers at the time, where one man accused the three brothers of robbing a pig. Because he was a Protestant who spoke English, because he was Protestant, his word had more weight in court than the Catholic brothers combined. Also, the brothers couldn't speak English, and at the time it was you weren't able to present a case to the courts, even though the vast majority of people in Ireland would have been Irish speakers at the time. So, very interesting history in it. I'll sing a verse or two now. to give you a taste. Na chahu min valhe Gaim shadaquir ortis gron vicide. Seron asra ud hawk angelte, God luled o heof, Maris shivian of wigil oir chastille, unto far shave, Sachair na canaries, Har na farigidias na New South Wales. Untevech na hasavaun, Saya noch mach no verar gustafle. Maar de hasach shion shachter maden, Godi treshanai, Chylach an tal of fuengel, Ing the lower her, da wird samreog, Smraing shantanen bocht, Ashed atmosphere ian chilir.
Anna Yasser Fad, that was a beautiful rendition.
Gemagat.
What I always find fascinating is the difference in Shannon's styles. You would be recognised very much as having the Dacia style from your native area. What would differentiate that now between the style of singing, the Ulster style, the Munster style, the Connemara style?
I suppose, again, going back to 15th, 16th century, there probably would have been more of a monoculture there within singing. And you can see that, like, there are bits of our songs that I would have, that they'd have up in Donegal and Belfast and stuff, but they've changed over the years. And the reason they changed was, in the last 200 years, you have the disintegration of Irish-speaking Ireland to the place now where there's maybe 20,000, I suppose, full-on native Irish speakers, all separated by hundreds of miles. And those 100, 200 years now where we've been separated from our next Gaeltacht, different customs have developed. And you'd see songs that were maybe written in the 17th, 18th, even 19th century, that were obviously written by one person, have changed over that time. Thankfully now with Radio na Gaeltacht, the national radio for Irish language, with the internet and with the Oireachtas na Gaeilge, which is our annual meet-up as Irish speakers from all different Irish-speaking areas, you're seeing maybe people get other Gaeltacht areas again, something that had been lost, and understanding their dialects and their different songs. But for us, I suppose, people need to know that, I suppose, we had Norman influence more so than other places, so there's a bit more French in Irish, which a lot of people find very, very hard to believe. There's such a French influence. We still have the R sound for our R's that would be different from Connemara. Connemara has its own style again, which is nearly separate from East Galway, West Galway and East Galway. East Galway would be more similar to our Irish than West Galway again. And then Donegal, obviously heavy influenced, and you could even say that the Irish, the songs from Donegal could sometimes be more related to West Scotland and the islands of Scotland than it would be to my own Irish, which is another interesting thing.
Yes.
We would be more, I think, melodic in the way that we sing, a bit more parlour singing-esque, if you could say that, whereas in Connemara, they have a real old, raw style. Loads of ornamentation. I could even sing you a song if you wanted.
Yes, that'd be lovely.
Yeah. There's a song here I have from Connemara, and I'm going to sing it in the Connemara style. It's sung originally by a man called Darach Ó Caháin, who would have lived in Rockcarn, which is what we talked about earlier, this colony of Irish speakers from the west of Ireland who were put onto land in the east of Ireland to try to promote the Irish language in the area back in the back in the 30s and 40s. Darach actually spent a lot of time in Leeds, a great singer, I'm a big fan. This song is called UCD Bhuachalla, which was actually written by Padraig Pearse, who was obviously one of the leaders, the main leader of the 1916 Rising. And I'll sing it for you here. UCD Bhuachalla, UCD Bhuachalla, UCD Bhuachalla, Nisher hiochtan taurem. Ha gránne wele getriel haar saile, Ogle garim heile mar garde, Gaelid hein is ni fraunt na Spanig is kursied roiger gauliv. UCD Bhuachalla, Bjarlum hona kied boainje, UCD Bhuachalla, Nisher hiochtan taurem. Ile dine vert ma vekke, Mar miem bjoen I garschachten, Granje wele agus mire gaskige fogert fauner gaule, UCD Bhuachalla, Bjarlum hona kied boainje, UCD Bhuachalla, Nisher hiochtan taurem.
Vishishin Anias, our father, Irial.
Gormagat.
Really lovely. I know you spent a period working in Connemara yourself, Irial. Were you ever tempted to pick up a few Connemara songs?
I have picked them up over the years. I refuse to pick up the accent and the style because I suppose our own style is so unique. And there's only 1,600 of us in our area, maybe 1,000 speakers, and maybe only a few hundred who would speak it every day fluently. So it's important to keep our own songs and our own dialect alive. But definitely I've picked up Connemara songs over the year. I love their style and there's some brilliant singers coming out of Connemara.
And are there any particular Connemara singers that you would be inspired by?
Sure, yeah. I'd be terrified of picking out a name now because you'd get in trouble with the others. But I'll sing a Dara Hucahawn song in a while, who's originally Connemara. And I suppose seeing as we're in UCD, Ciallaigh Concannon, obviously a huge fan of his. He's obviously died a few years ago. A great singer.
Yes.
I can remember when, with Shannon was some people, and we'll talk about some of the good singers now later on, but a lot of it is bad. There's bad singing, and he was one of the best. And I think that was best highlighted by the big competitions, the Oireachtas and the Sauna competitions. There'd be maybe 20 Shannon singers from all around the country, the best of the best, up on stage. But even at that level, people would have their favourites. So a song might go on for 6, 7, 8 minutes. And if you didn't like a singer, you'd leave, and you'd come back because you knew what order people were coming in. And I remember with Ciallaigh, any time he was singing, the room would fill. It would just fill. And then as soon as he was done, if they didn't like who's coming next, it would empty again. He was a fantastic singer. One of my good friends with my mom over the years. And he definitely was one of the standout singers.
He was, surely. And I remember his win at Oireachtas na Gaeltacht. He was a much-loved colleague of ours here and left us with a great knowledge of the Connemara tradition. Shadow singing would appear to have become increasingly popular in recent years.
Yeah. What
would you attribute that to?
I think it's appearing more in pop culture these days. You have the likes of Irial Linard, and he would have sung a verse or two in the Oscar-winning movie Brooklyn. I think I won an Oscar. It also appeared in The Wind That Shakes the Barley and a few other places, but I think it's entwined with the Irish language revival and the normalisation of the Irish language as well. I think we're moving more from a grammar-based way of teaching the language to teaching the language in a way that's enjoyable. So you do see a huge demand now in schools for Irish song. I think it's all wrapped up in that. And again, is there any better way to learn a language than by speaking it, doing something you love?
Absolutely.
So if people enjoy singing, and you go out and learn an Irish song, We spend a lot of time as well doing promoting sports through the Irish language, which is a growing element as well, which is nice. So hurling and football teams, and I see a basketball team started in Dublin recently.
That's right, one of our
that functions
alumni.
through Irish.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So that's all part of the normalisation, taking Irish out of the Seamoranga, out of the classroom, and into normal life.
And what other opportunities has the Irish language or Irish song given to you, Irial?
Oh my God, so much, everything. I suppose not alone in the opportunities people talk about, work opportunities, which obviously there are, but it gives a great sense of identity, to know where you come from, to know what your culture means, and the history of your people and the history of your area, and obviously the culture being so important in our area. So I think that identity is so good, especially in a world that's increasingly all about the individual. It's lovely to have that sense of identity, community and belonging that singing brings.
Absolutely. And of course, it's been particularly challenging for the artistic and cultural community, living under the COVID-19 restrictions. How has that impacted on you over the past 12 months?
Not alone with me, but talking to friends who are singers and musicians, the lockdown has killed creativity. I can remember, and I'm sure you're the same, the first few weeks of lockdown we were thinking, this is great, this gives me an opportunity to learn and to record things, and it's going to be amazing. But no one has, because that joie de vivre is gone. The going out and actually singing in public, because obviously singing is one of the worst things you can do to spread the virus. It's killed it. Even the opportunities to speak Irish have gone, because the places we used to collect together are gone. And we're increasingly online, and online is not an Irish-speaking friendly area. It's English-speaking culturally. So it has been very difficult. I see we've taken a big step backwards in the last year, but I'm very much looking forward to getting back, and I think there'll be renewed vigour to get back into singing and the Irish language once we're back to normal.
I'd certainly agree with you there. We're all dying to get going again.
Oh, yeah.
If you had 3 wishes for the traditional arts, a particular traditional song, what would you choose?
I think in West Belfast, they have the Catholic Church did a great job. If they did anything else, it was in promoting education. And in the South, we're one of the most educated countries in the world, and we always talk about that. But we know that there's a serious problem with the Irish language in the education system. I think what we need to do is continue what we talked about earlier and get rid of grammar and stop treating Irish like Latin, which is a dead language that you learn the grammatical structures for, and bring it back to life. And one of the key ways to do that is through song. We all love singing. So I would bring song into the classroom. I would get rid of grammar until maybe you're 16, 17, you might have interest in it then, and bring it back as a living language to the 90% of people who don't speak it every day. 98% of Irish speakers, but who were very much interested in learning the language. But we're failing. The system is failing, and it's turning people against the language. And I see that every day. I have conversations about this every day. So we need to get back and do that right in primary schools and in secondary schools. Education, number one. The second thing is our first introduction to Irish song is our national anthem. And again, when we talk about song and the Irish language, we're not teaching it properly. I don't think maybe 1% of our population, and tell me if I'm wrong, sing our national anthem and understand what they're saying. It doesn't happen. And it sums it up well for me how we teach the Irish language. We're not teaching the history of the song, we're not teaching what the words mean. So kids are just verbatim putting out what they've learned off by heart. And they'll do that up until the age of 18 in our exam structure. They will learn off by heart, they'll parrot it, and they'll never remember it again. So getting our national anthem would be a great start. I don't particularly like the national anthem as a song, but it sums it all up, how we're teaching so badly. I think the third one then is the teaching the history of the language. I think is hugely important. Why it disappeared. You ask most people why the language disappeared, they'll have their various reasons, but we don't really talk about it, and we don't talk about the importance of not just our language, but all the elements of arts that are tied up in that, especially poetry and song. that have disappeared in that time. I think we need to really, before we again go into our grammar and everything else that we do, too much of possibly, we need to really get in and focus on why we are where we are. And I think that would really start bringing back this love of the Irish language and re-engage people in learning the language, especially when they leave school, because again, once they leave school, that's the end of Irish language for 90% of Irish people, unfortunately, because there's just no environment for them to practice their language or be surrounded by her.
Well, hopefully we can provide some of that environment for them here in UCD. It's been wonderful talking to you today. Irial, thank you very much for that great insight into traditional song. And what my wish would be now is that you would give us one of your favourite songs to finish us with today.
Well, Clár, thanks very much. The last song I'm going to sing is called Fáinne Geal an Lé, which is the dawning of the day. It's actually a macaronic song, which means that it's half in English and half in Irish. The first verse I'll sing will be Irish, and then the second one will be pretty much the same thing. It translates very well. The song Dawning of the Day goes with the idea of an ashling or a dream song, which were these nationalist songs at a time when you weren't allowed to sing nationalist songs, and if you were found out at the time, you'd been put in prison. So the way that nationalist songs were sung at the time of English occupation was through using metaphor, and the metaphor was nearly always a woman. And this woman would appear, but the woman was Ireland, and so the English authorities would think that it's a love song, but they weren't love songs at all. They were love of your country songs. Again, these were very important at a time when nationalism was rising throughout Europe, especially mid 19th century. And this encompasses that. The first line is very interesting as well. It talks about Loch Lane, which many people in Ireland and throughout the world would know as the Lakes of Killarney. And the Lakes of Killarney in mythology were where the Fianna, who were the ancient defenders of Ireland, would have trained. And another interesting point to add to that, so much of mythology turns out to be true. We now know through DNA and the scientific method, this one with archaeology, that a lot of these things are true, and they know that it was probably an area that would have had people training back to 5,000 years ago, training in arms, is because they're finding these massive dumps of bronze, spears, daggers, massive smelting operations with copper and tin to make the bronze around Loch Lane, the Lakes of Killarney. Which is fascinating, But for this song, I suppose they're talking about the Fianna, which we still talk about to this day, with Fianna Fáil being the largest party in the country, taking their name from the idea of the Fianna. So this makes reference to that, but all with metaphor and all tied up in. You'd have to know your history and culture before you even begin to get what the song is talking about. But I'd sing the first verse and you'll see the references first in Irish and secondly in English. One more interesting point with the song, we talked about Clár Ní Bhuachalla earlier. Patrick Kavanagh would have written this poem a long time ago. You'll all know it as a love song called Raglan Road. When Patrick Kavanagh wrote it, he didn't have a melody for it, and Luke Kelly was actually listening to Clár Ní Bhuachalla in a pub one day, and he heard him sing this song. He says, I like that. And he put the melody with the words that Patrick Kavanagh had given. So a beautiful melody, and just highlights how important some of these melodies are for English songs as well, and they would have translated over the years. And a lot of our traditional songs now in English that you'd all know from Christy Moore and Dubliners and the Clancy Brothers would have come from these Irish songs. So I'll just sing it for you now. Madden mocht doch ausamach vroegelein. An saude tachts an krevle meisjes landre te ongrein. Gastar gam trevalti puert. Is bante mine re. Keo inglem mash. Ach an cholen das le fáinne geal an lé. One morning early as I marched out by the margin of Loch Lane, the sun shined bright, the trees in green, the summer bloomed again. I left the town and wandered down through fields both green and gay. Whom should I meet but a colleen sweet at the dawning of the day?
Vishishin Gaheevan our fad, Irial. That was really beautiful. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Gur maith agat sa Clár, thank you very much, and thanks for the UCD Festival for having me as well today.
And thanks to everyone who joined us today for Celtic Song. Slán agus Beannacht.